Stop a second. Let me see your documents that prove you are a U.S. citizen.
Why I should do this? Is there a clear reason?
I don't need a reason. Just show me the documents.
What's the legal reason for the stop?
I need proof of citizenship or lawful status. Show me and we're done.
I'm willing to cooperate. Identify yourself clearly and tell me the basis.
What happens when a plainclothes immigration agent blocks a black doctor outside a hospital before sunrise, demands proof he belongs there, and won't even say whether it's a detention? It doesn't stay a rude stop for long. Because the cameras don't just catch the attitude, they catch the tactics. And once witnesses step in, the whole thing turns into a documented mess the agent can't talk his way out of. Quick question before we rewind. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or state in the comments. And if you like stories where people don't win by yelling, but by staying sharp and forcing accountability, hit like and subscribe. You'll want more of these. Now, here's what everyone nearby saw. Dr. Malcolm Evans walked from the employee lot toward the main entrance. Badge visible, coffee in one hand, phone in the other. He looked like every early shift doctor who didn't sleep enough and had too much to do. An unknown man stepped into his path like he owned the sidewalk. Not in a friendly way, not with a question. With that clipped tone people use when they're trying to turn a public space into a private interrogation. The man demanded identification and leaned on federal authority without explaining anything. Evans didn't flinch. He didn't puff his chest. He didn't try to prove he was important. He kept it procedural. He asked if he was being detained or if he was free to go. He asked for the legal reason. He asked the man to identify himself clearly. The man didn't answer those questions. He just repeated the demand for ID and moved closer. That was the whole play. Crowd the space, control the pace, make compliance feel like the only safe option. Evans didn't give him the reaction he wanted. No anger, no panic, no fast movements. He stayed in place and repeated the same boundaries. Identify yourself. State the reason. Clarify detention status. The man switched tactics. He implied that refusing meant guilt. He hinted at searching Evans. He raised his voice just enough to pull attention from the entrance doors. A couple staff members looked over, then slowed down. That's what the agent wanted. Public pressure. Embarrassment as a weapon. Evans didn't bite. He repositioned slightly, not dramatically. Just enough that he wasn't boxed in. He didn't sprint. He didn't back up like he was scared either. He scanned the area like someone who understood environments. Exterior cameras, a security patrol route, staff traffic. A lit entrance with people going in and out. He used what was there. Evans told the man to call his supervisor if this was legitimate. Then he asked for hospital security to come out. Not as a threat, as a step. A normal step in a workplace with policies. That request changed the temperature. You could see it in the man's posture. Because one-on-one intimidation works best when nobody else is watching and nobody else is writing anything down. Now there were witnesses. Now there would be names, times, footage. Now it wasn't just Evans versus a guy with a badge and an attitude. A nurse coming in for shifts slowed near the doors. A resident stood half-turned like he wasn't trying to stare, but couldn't ignore it. A custodian paused by the sidewalk edge, watching the space the way people do when they're ready to step in if it goes sideways. The man tried to keep it vague. He kept repeating that he was federal and that Evans needed to comply. Still no clear reason. Still no direct answer on detention. Evans stayed steady and kept making the man choose. Either this was a detention with a reason, or it was not. Either the man could identify himself properly, or he couldn't. Either there was lawful cause, or this was harassment dressed up as authority. Security arrived within minutes. And that was the point where the agent stopped acting like the scene belonged to him. Because security didn't care about swagger. They cared about procedure. Who are you? What agency? Why are you stopping an employee on hospital property? Are you detaining him, yes or no? The agent tried to talk around it. Security didn't let him, and right there on camera in front of staff, the agent's story started to wobble. Security showed up with that work mode calm. No drama, just questions. The kind that force people to either explain themselves or expose themselves. They asked the agent who he was, what agency, and why he was stopping an employee on hospital property. They asked if Dr. Evans was being detained. The agent tried to keep control by staying vague. He leaned hard on federal authority and investigation language. He didn't want to say the words that create liability, detention, reasonable suspicion, probable cause. Anything specific. Security didn't let him float. They asked for credentials. They asked for a name. They asked for a badge number. They asked if he'd checked in with administration like any outside enforcement is supposed to do. That's when the agent tried a different move. He attempted to make Evans the problem. He suggested Evans was being uncooperative. He implied that refusal alone made him suspicious. Evans stayed locked in. He didn't argue character. He didn't argue status. He kept the same line. He'd cooperate once the agent identified himself clearly and stated the legal basis for the stop. He repeated that he didn't consent to any search. He repeated the question about detention. Security started treating it like what it was: an unknown plainclothesman trying to hold a staff doctor in place without a clear reason. They positioned themselves so Evans wasn't boxed in. Subtle, but deliberate. They also made sure they were between the agent and the entrance traffic. Now the agent had a new problem. He couldn't intimidate Evans, and he couldn't intimidate security either. So he reached for the oldest tool in the kit: volume. He spoke louder so staff would hear. He threw out phrases that sound official but don't mean much. He tried to create the impression that Evans was doing something wrong by not instantly complying. It didn't land. Not the way he wanted. Because the staff watching weren't confused about what they were seeing. They saw a doctor trying to go to work. They saw a man trying to stop him without explaining why. They saw security asking normal questions and getting dodges in return. Security asked if the agent had an active case tied to the hospital. They asked if he had a description and why Evans matched it. They asked if there was a warrant. They asked if there was a bolo with a specific person in it. The agent gave the kind of answer that sounds confident until someone repeats it back slowly. Something about a possible match. Something about a lookout. Something about needing to verify. Security pressed for details. Height, clothing, name, photo, anything. That's where the story started shifting. First it was a match, then it became similar, then it turned into routine verification, then it slid into just doing my job. You could see the scramble. He didn't want to admit he had nothing. He also didn't want to leave, because leaving looks like he was wrong. Evans didn't help him save face. He didn't attack him either. He just let the questions do the work. Security asked for the agent's supervisor. Evans asked again too. Not emotional, just persistent. And security backed it. They told the agent to call his supervisor or they would. The agent finally made the call. While they waited, security documented time, location, description, names of witnesses who were willing to give them. They noted the badge and credentials once the agent reluctantly showed them. They also made it clear the hospital had exterior cameras covering the walkway. That camera mention hit different, because now it wasn't a he said, it was footage. Audio from multiple angles, timestamp. The agent tried one last pressure move. He told Evans that if he walked away, it would look bad. He hinted there could be consequences. Evans didn't respond with fear. He responded like a professional who understands leverage. He told security he had rounds. He stated he was willing to wait for the supervisor's arrival, but he wasn't going to be held without a lawful reason. That's the moment security got sharper. They told the agent, plainly, that he needed to clarify whether Evans was being detained. Because if he wasn't, Evans was going to work. The agent hesitated. And hesitation told everyone what the agent wouldn't say out loud. Because if he said yes, he'd need justification. If he said no, he'd lose control. That's when the supervisor arrived. And the second that supervisor stepped into the scene, the whole vibe changed again. The supervisor didn't posture. He went straight to verification. Quick questions, quick checks, the stuff that takes 1 minute when it's actually legitimate. And the truth started to surface fast. Evans wasn't the person the agent claimed to be looking for. Not even close. The supervisor walked in and didn't waste time trying to win the moment. He went straight for the basics. Who the employee was, what the agent thought he had, what the actual target description was supposed to be, what the legal basis was for a stop on hospital property. And you could almost feel the agent's story shrinking as the questions got simpler. The supervisor asked Evans for his hospital ID. Evans showed it. Security watched the exchange closely, making sure nobody turned it into a grab or a snatch and search moment. The supervisor checked the badge, looked at the name, looked at the photo, then looked back at his own agent, like he already knew what this was, because the mismatch was obvious. The agent tried to patch it anyway. He mentioned a similar description and acted like it was normal to stop someone based on a vague idea of who they might be. He tried to slide the narrative into no harm done, routine check, everyone move on. Security didn't let that rewrite happen. They asked what the original description actually was. They asked whether the agent had a photo. They asked whether he had a case number. They asked whether he had a requested hospital cooperation through the proper channels. The supervisor didn't answer with a story. He answered with damage control. He told the agent to disengage. He told him Evans wasn't the person. He told him to clear out. The agent didn't apologize. He didn't admit anything. He tried to leave like it was a normal stop that reached a normal conclusion. But the scene was already locked into record. Security had the time log. They had the agent's identity. They had his supervisor's name. They had witnesses who watched the whole interaction start to finish. They also had exterior cameras that covered the walkway and the entrance. And now, because the supervisor had stepped in and confirmed Evans wasn't the target, the agent had no room left to claim ongoing suspicion. The reason for holding Evans in place was gone. Evans kept it calm to the end. He didn't take a victory lap. He didn't lecture the agent. He said one thing that landed because it was clean and factual. He wasn't going to be treated like a suspect without a reason, and he wasn't going to consent his way into someone else's mistake. Then he went to work. That's the part people always miss when they watch these situations from the outside. The moment ends, but your body doesn't. Evans walked into the hospital with his coffee and his phone like he'd planned. But he wasn't fine. He was controlled. There's a difference. He still had patients, he still had rounds, he still had to lead a team and make decisions like nothing happened. That takes effort. Later that day, security pulled the incident report together. They preserved camera footage. They wrote down witness names. They flagged that a federal agent had approached and attempted to stop an employee without checking in, without a stated lawful basis, and without clear detention language. The next layer hit fast. Hospital administration got notified. Risk management got looped in. HR got looped in. Not because Evans was special, because it happened on their property, involved their employee, and created liability. And now the agency couldn't pretend it never happened. Because when you have a timestamped security log, camera footage, there's witness statements, and a supervisor who verified the mistake on scene. That's not rumor. That's evidence. The agent tried to escape the situation with one last move as he left. He spoke like he expected everyone to drop it. Like the badge itself was supposed to end the conversation. Security didn't argue with him. They didn't need to. They just told him the hospital would be following up through official channels. By the next morning, the story had already moved through the hospital in the way these things always do. Not as gossip, as a warning. People didn't talk about it like some weird thing. They talked about it like a line got crossed and everyone saw it. Nurses, residents, security, even staff who weren't there. because somebody always knows somebody who was standing 10 feet away. Evans showed up for his shift again. Same routine, same badge, same parking lot. Different feeling. He kept doing his job, but he didn't let it slide. Not privately, not quietly. Not with a, whatever, it's over. That day, he met with hospital security and asked for the incident report number. He asked who had access to the camera footage. He asked for the names of the supervisor and agent as recorded. He asked what the hospital's official process was when an outside enforcement officer approached staff on campus. He treated it like a patient case. Document, confirm, escalate properly. Security already had the key pieces. Time-stamped logs of when the agent approached, names and descriptions. Witnesses who agreed to be listed. Confirmation that the supervisor arrived and ended it. Camera angles covering the walkway and entrance. Then hospital administration stepped in. Risk management got involved first because this wasn't just someone felt uncomfortable. This was an outside agent interfering with a staff member in the course of reporting for duty, on hospital property, in front of witnesses, with cameras. That's liability, safety, and operations all at once. HR got involved too, not to handle feelings, but to support the employee and document what happened as a workplace incident. They asked Evans for a written statement. He gave them one. Tight, factual, chronological, no extra, no rant. He also filed an external complaint, not a social media blast, not a viral post, the formal kind. He submitted the incident details, names, time, location, and the fact that the agent refused to state whether it was a detention while trying to restrict movement. He emphasized that the entire encounter existed on camera and involved multiple employees as witnesses. That detail mattered. Because he said, she said is easy to bury. Video and logs aren't. The hospital did its own follow-up. They contacted the agency through official channels and made something clear. Any future presence on campus required check-in through hospital administration and security. No more free roaming, no more lone plainclothes stops of staff walking in from the employee lot. If there was a legitimate need, it went through the proper route. And here's what changed fast, because hospitals don't like chaos. Security updated protocol. Staff got a short guidance memo. It didn't turn into a political speech. It was practical. If someone claims federal authority on campus, employees were told to direct them to security and keep moving if they weren't detained. If an employee felt blocked or pressured, call security immediately. No one was expected to handle it alone. Security also shifted patrol presence during early hours for a while. Not because the hospital feared immigration agents, because they wanted staff to feel protected walking in at 5 a.m. As for the agent, this is where reality comes in. You don't always see instant public punishment. You usually see quiet consequences. The agent's name was now attached to a recorded incident. His supervisor's presence on the footage mattered too. The hospital's complaint created a paper trail outside the building. That changes how people act in the future. It forces oversight. It forces internal review. It also makes it harder for that same agent to pull the same move on the same property again without someone recognizing him. Evans didn't get a parade. He didn't need one. He got something better. A documented record that protected him and everyone who came after him. A protocol. A line in the sand that said, you don't get to treat staff like suspects just because you feel like it. And that's the part people should take from this. Evans didn't win because he was a doctor. He won because he didn't play the agent's game. He didn't argue emotions. He didn't try to impress anyone. He forced procedure. He asked the questions that matter. Am I being detained or free to go? What's the legal reason? Who are you exactly? Call a supervisor. Bring security. Put it on record. That's how you survive an overreach moment without turning it into a bigger problem for yourself. So here's the question for you. If you were Evans, would you have stayed calm and gone procedural? Or would the pressure have pulled you into a reaction the other guy could use? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you've ever had someone use authority like a weapon, share this with somebody who needs a smarter playbook. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. Real situations, real accountability, and people who refuse to get bullied out of their dignity.
Stop. Don't go anywhere. What'd you take?
Sir, why you asking me? I didn't steal anything.
Then show me. Empty your pockets.
I don't want to empty my pockets. Sir, I told you I have nothing.
We can do this easy or we can do it the hard way. Pockets. Now.
I'm not trying to start anything, but I didn't take it then.
What happens when a mall security officer decided a black teen looked like a shoplifter, blocked his path with zero report, and started treating guilt like it was already proven? The answer got ugly fast because the cameras didn't just catch a bad stop. They caught an officer building a case after the accusation. Quick check-in. Where are you watching from right now? City and state? And if you watch stories about accountability, body cams, and people getting exposed by their own choices, hit like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. So here's what was happening in that moment. The teenager had just walked out of a store with a shopping bag, drink in hand, receipt inside the bag like most people do without thinking. He wasn't running. He wasn't hiding anything. He was doing what teens do at malls every day. The officer came in fast anyway. No slow approach, no polite ask. He closed distance, stepped into the teen's lane, and turned it into a corner. Then he went straight to an accusation. Not a question, not a check. He acted like the theft already happened, and the only thing left was getting the kid to admit it or comply with a search. That's the move. Pressure first. Facts later. The teen froze. Not because he had something to hide, because a grown man with authority was suddenly talking to him like he'd already been caught. His brain did what a lot of people's brains do when power hits them out of nowhere. It stalled. He tried to explain he'd paid. He tried to point at the bag, the drink, the normal stuff. None of it mattered because the officer wasn't listening for truth. He was listening for a crack. Then came the consent trap. The officer pushed him to empty his pockets. He demanded the receipt. He leaned into that classic intimidation script where refusal gets framed as proof. He hinted at cuffs. He made the teen feel like the safest option was to just hand everything over and hope it ends. And the teen was alone in that exact spot. His dad had stepped away for a few minutes. Quick call, quick stop at a kiosk. He'd left his son near the storefront because it was a mall, not a dark alley. That's how normal this was supposed to be. Except it wasn't normal. Not anymore. People started noticing. A couple shoppers slowed down. One person stared a little too long. Someone else lifted a phone for a second, then lowered it like they weren't sure if this was their business. That hesitation matters. It's how bad stops survive in public spaces. The officer kept control by keeping the teen off balance. No request to the store. No contact with loss prevention. No quick confirmation that anything was missing. Just a tight circle of demands. Like the whole point was to make the teen mess up under stress. Then the dad came back into frame. He didn't run in yelling. He didn't swing his weight around. He didn't do that movie thing where somebody flashes a badge and everyone freezes. He read the scene like an investigator. He clocked the officer's stance, the kid's posture, the bag, the distance, the tone, the fact that this had already escalated way past a simple check. And he did one important thing right away. He didn't start with a speech. He started with questions. That's where the story turned. Not with anger, with structure. Because when you force a stop to explain itself out loud, a lot of confidence disappears. The dad stepped in close enough to be heard, not close enough to escalate. He didn't touch the officer, didn't grab his son, didn't try to big dog anyone. He just inserted himself into the space the officer was controlling. Then he did the one thing pressure tactics hate. He slowed it down. He asked what the stop was for. Simple, clean, no attitude. The officer didn't answer with specifics. He stayed on the accusation track. He kept directing the teen to comply. bag, pockets, receipt. Now. That's when the dad started stacking questions like he was building a report in real time. He asked who reported the theft. The officer didn't give a name. He asked what store called it in. The officer gestured vaguely toward the storefront the kid had just exited, but he didn't say a manager's name, didn't say loss prevention, didn't say a call came through dispatch. Nothing you could pin down. He asked what item was stolen. The officer couldn't say. That's a problem because someone stole something isn't reasonable suspicion. It's a guess. And guesses don't justify detaining a kid and ordering him around like he's already guilty. The officer tried to pivot. He claimed the teen matched behavior he'd seen before. He referenced prior shoplifting incidents at the mall. He leaned on the vague stuff officers use when they don't have a real trigger. The dad didn't argue. He didn't debate. He just kept forcing the officer to name facts. He asked what the specific behavior was. The officer said things that sounded official but didn't mean anything. Looking around, walking fast, holding the bag a certain way. Normal mall behavior. Stuff half the shoppers do without thinking. Then the dad asked the question that boxed him in. He asked if there was an active theft report right now, yes or no. The officer avoided the yes or no. He kept returning to the demand for consent to search, because that was his real plan. Get the kid to comply, then write it up like the stop was productive. Even if nothing turned up, he could still frame the contact as justified. And the dad didn't let him. He asked if the teen was being detained or free to leave. That question changes everything. It forces the officer to choose. Detain without a basis or let go and lose control of the scene. The officer didn't want either option, so he tried the third one. Threats wrapped as choices. Comply and it's quick. Refuse and it gets serious. The teen looked like he was shrinking into himself. Not crying, not yelling. Just stuck in that awful spot where you're trying to be respectful while somebody treats you like a suspect in front of strangers. The dad stayed steady. He shifted his attention to his son for a second, checked if he was okay, then went right back to the officer. He asked whether the officer had spoken to the store's loss prevention. The officer hadn't. He asked whether anyone from the store had identified his son as a suspect. The officer couldn't say yes. Then the dad pointed out what the officer had done wrong without turning it into a speech. He'd approached with an accusation first, without confirming a theft report, and then tried to make compliance create justification after the fact. That's when the officer got defensive. He claimed he was doing his job. He claimed he was preventing theft. He claimed he didn't need a report to make contact. The dad didn't bite. He requested a supervisor, right there. No drama, just a direct request. He also requested mall security management. Same tone, same calm. Now the officer had a different problem. Because the moment supervisors show up, the first thing they ask is the same thing the dad asked. What's the basis? And that's when reality starts squeezing the story. Sergeant Patel arrived with the look of someone who'd handled 100 messy public stops and didn't want 101. She scanned the scene fast. The teen pinned near the storefront. The officer holding the space, the bag in the teen's hand, the small crowd building. She went straight to the point. She asked what the stop was based on. Officer Harlow tried to keep it vague. He framed it like prevention. He said he was being proactive because the mall had theft issues. He implied the kid's behavior triggered it. Patel didn't let him stay general. She asked who reported a theft. He didn't have a name. She asked which store requested him to stop that kid. He pointed toward the store entrance, but still didn't give a manager, a loss prevention contact, or a call time. He had no reference point that could be verified. Then she asked what item was stolen. He couldn't answer that either. That's when the stop stopped sounding like enforcement and started sounding like guessing. A real theft stop has an origin. Somebody saw something. Somebody called. Somebody requested a hold. There's a specific item, a description, a time, a direction of travel. None of that existed here. Mall security management got called in, and Ruben Vega showed up looking tight, like he already understood what no complainant means for liability. He asked the same questions, but in his own way. Was there an active theft report? Did loss prevention ask for assistance? Did any store confirm a missing item? No, no, no. Harlow tried to salvage it. He started talking about matching behavior and prior incidents. He suggested he'd seen kids steal in similar ways before. He kept pushing the idea that suspicion alone was enough. Patel cut through that. She asked whether the teen was being detained or free to go. Harlow hesitated because either answer created a problem. If the kid was detained, he needed an actual basis. If the kid was free to go, then all the pocket emptying and receipt demands were just intimidation dressed up as a voluntary interaction. Darius stayed calm and kept it factual. He told Patel the officer didn't open with a question. He opened with an accusation. He blocked the teen's path and demanded pockets and a receipt, then implied consequences if the teen didn't cooperate. Patel turned to Harlow and asked about his camera. That landed, because if Bodycam was required and it was on, it would capture exactly how the contact began. If it wasn't on, that created a different issue. Either way, the truth was about to get locked in. Vega added the mall angle. He looked up at the camera domes, then down the corridor. He didn't need to say much. Everyone there understood that hallway had coverage, and the footage would show whether Harlow had any confirmation before he treated the kid like a suspect. Patel pulled Harlow a few steps aside, low voice, direct posture. When they came back, she didn't debate the stop anymore. She ended it. She told Harlow to step back and let the teen go. Then she told Darius and his son they were free to leave and asked if the teen needed medical attention or anything. Not because the teen looked injured, because she was documenting the fact that this stop had crossed into coercion, and she knew it. Darius didn't do the victory lap. He didn't announce his job. He didn't threaten consequences on the spot. He said one line controlled and clear, aimed at the point everyone was pretending not to see. The officer had accused first and searched for a reason after. And once that was said out loud, the whole scene changed. The crowd lost interest. The officer lost momentum. The teen got his space back. But Darius wasn't letting it end as a hallway misunderstanding. He already knew what happens when you let these stops fade out without paper and evidence. Darius didn't let the moment fade into everyone go about your day. He knew how that works. If you walk away without locking down facts, the report becomes the story. And the report usually protects the person with authority. He walked his son away from the crowd first, not far. Just enough to get breathing room and get the officer out of earshot. Then he did what most people don't think to do because they're still shaking. He documented. He checked the receipt, took a clear photo of it, and saved it with the time. He took quick photos of the hallway cameras above the storefront and the corridor because that mattered later when someone tried to claim the footage couldn't be found. He asked 2 witnesses for names and numbers. One agreed, one didn't. He didn't push, he moved on. He also took note of who was present on the authority side. Officer Harlow, Sergeant Patel, Mall Security Manager Vega, where they were standing, what time the supervisor arrived, what time the teen was released. Small details. That's what stops lies. Before leaving, Darius asked Patel for the incident documentation tied to the contact. If there wasn't an incident number, he wanted the supervisor to acknowledge that, too. He asked if the officer had Bodycam on and whether policy required it for public contacts. He didn't argue about policy in the hallway. He collected answers. Then he left the mall with his son. No celebration, no lecture, just a steady walkout. That night, Darius wrote the complaint the way he expected an investigator to write it if the roles were reversed. He didn't call the officer names. He didn't make it emotional. He listed actions in order. The officer blocked the teen's path. The officer opened with an accusation, not a question. The officer demanded pockets and receipt. The officer implied consequences for noncompliance. The officer had no theft report, no store request, No loss prevention contact. The stop only ended once a supervisor demanded a basis. He attached the receipt photo. He added witness contact info. He included the time window for surveillance. Then he sent preservation requests, mall camera angles, any body cam footage, any radio traffic, any logs showing whether a theft call ever happened. He included the exact corridor and storefront area so nobody could play dumb later. Internal Affairs opened it as a real inquiry, not a customer service issue. The first thing they pulled was video. That's where Officer Harlow's story started falling apart, because the footage showed sequence, and sequence is everything. It showed no one running from a store, no employee chasing, no loss prevention staff pointing anyone out. It showed the officer making the first move based on his own judgment, then trying to force the situation into a confession or consent outcome. The paperwork didn't match the behavior on screen. IA also did what IA does when a stop smells like a pattern. They audited him. They pulled recent contacts at the mall. They looked for the same structure. Vague suspicion, immediate pressure for consent searches, heavy emphasis on compliance, thin documentation. They compared demographics. They compared how often he contacted teens of color versus others for the same behavior. It wasn't a one-off. They found repeated pretext stops. Stops framed as proactive safety but carried out like fishing. Get them nervous. Get them to consent. If you find anything, you win. If you find nothing, you still write it up like you were justified to check. Then came the lawsuit. The family's attorney focused on two things: unlawful detention and discriminatory enforcement. The legal hook was simple. You can't detain someone just because you feel like it. You need reasonable suspicion tied to specific facts. And you don't get to treat suspicion like guilt while you search for a reason after you've already cornered someone. Discovery did the real damage. The officer's report got compared to video. His wording got compared to body cam audio if it existed. His claim of matching behavior got tested against what actually happened. The lack of a theft report got confirmed through records. No call, no request, no complainant, no missing item report. That mismatch was the turning knife. Because it wasn't just a bad stop anymore. It was an officer willing to reshape reality on paper. The city had a choice: fight and risk trial with video and a pattern, or settle and control the fallout. They settled or lost. Either way, consequences landed. Policy changes followed because the department didn't want that case repeating. Mall contacts got tightened. Officers needed a documented complainant or documented facts tied to a suspected theft. Any search required clear justification, and consent couldn't be pressured the way Harlow pressured it. Supervisor involvement became mandatory for detentions in that mall setting. Body cam activation became non-negotiable for contacts like that. As for Officer Harlow, discipline escalated. Suspensions don't survive video plus pattern. His credibility didn't survive. And once credibility goes, policing work becomes a liability. Termination became the outcome because the department couldn't defend him in future cases without dragging this one back into the light. Jalen got something bigger than a momentary win. He got proof that he wasn't crazy for freezing. He wasn't weak for getting quiet. He was a teenager in a situation designed to make him fold. The only reason it didn't swallow him was because his dad came back, asked the right questions, and refused to let intimidation become a story. And Darius made sure that his son understood the truth without dressing it up. That accusation was never about a stolen item. If it was, there would have been a report, a description, a store request, a specific claim. What happened was an officer looked at a black teen with a bag and decided that was enough. So here's the question for you. If you were standing there watching, would you have pulled your phone out and kept it up? Would you have offered your name as a witness? Or would you have looked away and kept walking? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And share this with someone who needs to hear how accountability actually happens in real life. And if you want more story times like this, realistic, modern, and built around facts, make sure you subscribe.
Sir, stop right there. We need to check you.
What's the reason for the stop?
There's a suspicious activity report. You match the description. Move over here.
What suspected crime?
Man, just comply. You don't have to ask about everything.
I'm willing to identify myself through courthouse security. Verify me at that desk.
Not at the door. Over here.
What happened when a black federal judge walked into his own courthouse on a quiet Thursday morning and a uniformed officer decided he looked like a problem? The answer got ugly fast because the officer didn't just try to check him out. He tried to control him in public with no clear reason. And the cameras didn't just catch an embarrassing moment. They caught a breakdown of legal standards in real time. Before we get into it, tell me where you're watching from. Country, state, city, whatever. And if you watch these stories because you're tired of power getting abused with zero consequences, hit like and subscribe. It tells the algorithm you want accountability content, not excuses. Now rewind a few minutes because this didn't start as some loud scene. It started like any other workday. Judge Malcolm Reed arrived early like he usually did. Same routine, same calm pace. He wasn't rushing. No entourage. Just a leather briefcase, a travel mug, and that quiet, locked-in focus people get when they've got a full docket and no time for nonsense. He crossed the plaza towards the employee entrance. Federal buildings had their own rhythm in the morning. A few staffers drifting in. Security stationed at the doors. A couple people checking phones while walking. Normal. Then Officer Daniel Hargrove stepped into his path. Not a greeting, not a quick question. A hard stop. The kind that wasn't about safety, it was about dominance. Hargrove told him to move to the side. Told him to keep his hands visible. Told him to stop right there. Judge Reed didn't argue, and he did the exact thing people always claim they want. He stayed still, hands open, no sudden movement, calm face, calm voice. He asked one question first, the one that matters every time. He asked if he was being detained. Hargrove didn't answer cleanly. He said there was a suspicious activity report. He said the judge fit the description. That was it. No crime name, no behavior described, no actual detail. Just that phrase people use when they want to act first and justify later. Judge Reed asked what the suspected crime was. Hargrove didn't give one. He repeated the suspicious activity line and pushed another command, something like stepping back and staying put, while he figured it out. Here's where most people mess up. They try to talk their way out emotionally. They get loud, they get defensive, or they panic and start digging for ID too fast, and the officer treats that like a threat. Judge Reed didn't do any of that. He kept his hands visible and told the officer he was willing to identify himself, but the officer needed to state the legal basis for ordering him around. He needed articulable facts. He needed something more than a vague description. Hargrove didn't like hearing that. You could tell by how his posture changed. He leaned into the authority voice, the I said move energy. Judge Reed didn't match his volume. He didn't match his ego. He stayed professional, almost boring about it. That was the point. He told the officer he was a federal judge assigned to the building. He told him he had credentials. He told him he'd present them safely. And he told him to verify through proper channels, courthouse security, internal directory, whatever the procedure was. That's when Hargrove tried to tighten the circle. He edged closer. He told the judge to stop talking. He tried to reposition him away from the door, away from the entrance cameras, away from the security desk behind the glass. And the judge didn't go. Not because he was being stubborn, because he understood what that movement meant. Once you let someone relocate you with no basis, the story becomes theirs. The record gets murky. The power shifts. Judge Reed held his position and repeated the process. Verify credentials, state the grounds, call security, document it. By now, staffers were noticing. At first, people did that thing where they pretend not to look. They slow down, they glance. They keep walking, but their eyes keep coming back. Then someone stopped completely. It was Elena Vargas, a young clerk coming in with a tote bag and a badge on a lanyard. She saw the judge's hands open, saw the officer crowding him, and saw the mismatch right away. She didn't jump into the middle. She did what people do now. She pulled out her phone and started recording. Another staffer followed her lead, then another, quietly. No shouting, just phones coming up. That changed the whole temperature. Hargrove noticed. You could almost feel his confidence bump for half a second, because some officers think cameras protect them. Then the second bump came, the one that hits when they realize the footage might not back their story. He tried to get control back with bigger commands. He told the judge to comply. He implied the judge was resisting. He tried to frame the calm refusal to move as a problem. Judge Reed didn't take the bait. He asked again if he was being detained or free to enter the building. Hargrove still wouldn't answer directly. So the judge did the next step. He told Hargrove to call courthouse security immediately and verify his identity. He offered the credential information in a controlled way. No fast reaching, no rummaging. He described where the badge was and asked the officer if he wanted it displayed or if he preferred security confirm it first. That's the part people don't understand. The judge wasn't pulling rank. He was forcing procedure into a situation that was sliding into improvisation. And improvisation is where bias hides. The building's glass doors were right there. The security desk inside had a clean view. Hargrove could have walked 10 feet, asked for verification, and ended it. But he didn't want to do that yet. He wanted compliance first. So he stalled. He repeated that line again. Fit the description. Judge Reed pressed for details. What description? Who reported it? What behavior? What time? What exactly did the caller say the person did? Hargrove didn't have answers. He had posture. And with every second that passed, more phones came up. More witnesses locked in. More staff realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was an officer trying to control a black man at a federal courthouse without being able to explain why. Right then, Hargrove made the move that turned the whole thing from uncomfortable to serious. He reached toward his radio like he was about to call it in, but he didn't call courthouse security. He called it out like it was a street stop, and you could see Judge Reed clock it immediately. He didn't flinch. He didn't raise his voice. He just tightened his language and demanded the proper channel again. Because once the wrong channel gets involved, it snowballs. And this time, it was snowy conditions already. Hargrove's radio call brought the wrong kind of attention. Not courthouse verification, not, "Can you confirm this employee?" He treated it like a suspect stop. Judge Reed didn't panic. He didn't start talking faster. He narrowed the issue. He told Hargrove to state clearly whether Reed was being detained. He told him to state the suspected offense. He told him to stop giving movement orders without legal grounds. Hargrove tried a different tactic. He shifted from commands to insinuations. He kept repeating that someone reported suspicious activity, like repeating it made it real. He also tried to pressure Reed into producing ID on the officer's timeline in the officer's way. Reed didn't refuse to identify. He refused to play a sloppy game. He told Hargrove he would present credentials safely, but only after Hargrove stopped escalating and contacted courthouse security. Reed didn't want a look at this quickly moment. He wanted a logged verification through the people who actually controlled access to that building. More staff gathered near the entrance. Not a crowd, but enough. People stood still. Phones stayed up. Some filmed from a distance. One person clearly aimed at the officer's nameplate. Hargrove noticed the nameplate angle and adjusted his stance like he wanted to block it. That alone told everyone what kind of stop this was turning into. Reed kept his hands visible the entire time. He also kept his voice even. That's what made the officer's behavior look worse with every second. No one watching could pretend this was about safety. Reed wasn't acting unsafe. Reed was acting like a trained professional. Hargrove tried to reclaim the scene by creating urgency. He implied Reed was delaying an investigation. He hinted that people who cooperate have nothing to worry about. Reed cut through that with one point. Cooperation doesn't replace legal standards. He asked again for the articulable facts behind the stop. Not vibes, not a vague description. What did the caller actually see, and what did Reed actually do? Hargrove still couldn't answer. Then he tried to reposition Reed again, pushing him toward an area away from the doors and away from the glass where security could see. It wasn't subtle. That's when a staffer behind the doors tapped the glass, getting security's attention. Now the building's security desk was watching directly. Reed took that opening. He told Hargrove to contact that desk and confirm. He told him the badge number was available if needed. He told him he wasn't moving until verification happened. Hargrove hesitated. That hesitation mattered because it exposed the truth. Verification would end the stop, and he didn't want it ended yet. He wanted compliance first, then maybe verification after. And that's when the mask started slipping. Hargrove said the quiet part in a cleaner uniform tone. He suggested Reed didn't look like who he claimed to be. He treated Reed's credentials as suspect before even seeing them, like the claim itself was the problem. People recording caught that shift immediately. You could feel it. A couple staffers stopped pretending they were just passing through. They stayed planted. Reed didn't react emotionally. He didn't get into identity arguments. He treated it like a policy failure. He told Hargrove that this was a federal facility with established verification protocols, and Hargrove was refusing to use them. Reed told him that if he continued ordering movement without a stated offense and without reasonable suspicion, it would be documented as an unlawful detention attempt. That word, documented, changed Hargrove's face. He realized Reed wasn't trying to win a moment. Reed was building a record. Hargrove tried to interrupt. Reed kept it measured and short. He told him to call his supervisor. He told him to call courthouse security. He told him to stop escalating. Inside the glass, security began moving. A supervisor stepped away from the desk with purpose. You could see it in the way she walked. Straight line, no hesitation. Hargrove looked toward the doors and tried to talk over it, like he could still steer the narrative before help arrived. Too late. Because now it wasn't just Reed versus Hargrove. It was Reed, witnesses, multiple camera angles, and a supervisor coming out to verify in front of everyone. And once verification happened, there'd be only one question left. Why did Hargrove need this stop to happen in the first place? Security supervisor Asha Nguyen came out fast. No hesitation. She took one look at the scene and did the first thing Hargrove should have done from the start. She asked for verification points. Judge Reed gave them. Controlled. Minimal movement. Credentials ready, but not flashed like a stunt. He kept his hands visible and let Asha run the process. Asha didn't treat it like a debate. She treated it like a checklist. Badge, name, internal confirmation. Hargrove tried to speak over it. He tried to keep the stop alive by repeating the same excuse. Suspicious activity. Fits the description. Public safety. Asha didn't bite. She asked him what the specific description was and what specific conduct was reported. Hargrove couldn't provide it, not cleanly, not concretely. He didn't have a reported crime. He didn't have articulable facts. He had a vague call and a guess. That was the moment the tone flipped, because Asha's verification came back fast. Judge Malcolm Reed was exactly who he said he was, assigned to that building, expected, cleared. Hargrove's face changed. Not embarrassment first, irritation, like the truth was inconvenient. He tried to downgrade the whole thing into a quick check. He acted like he'd been doing routine diligence. But the phones were still up. Witnesses heard every command. They saw the attempts to move Reed away from the doors. They heard the refusal to state a suspected offense. They watched Hargrove call it in like a street stop instead of a courthouse verification. Asha told Hargrove, in plain terms, that verification was complete and the interaction was over. She also told him to provide his supervisor contact immediately. That's when Hargrove tried to retreat without accountability. He pivoted like he wanted to walk away and let it disappear. Judge Reed stopped that part. He didn't chase him. He didn't threaten him. He made it procedural. He told Asha he wanted every relevant record preserved: bodycam, radio traffic, dispatch logs, courthouse camera angles, entry logs. He also requested the names and contact info for the staff who witnessed it and the security team who responded. He said it calmly, like he'd done it before, like he was already writing the outline of the complaint in his head. Hargrove tried one last push. He implied Reed was overreacting. He suggested it was not that serious. Reed didn't accept that framing. He pointed out the core issue. Hargrove issued orders without a stated legal basis and used a vague description as cover. He made the officer choose between two options on record. Either there was reasonable suspicion supported by facts, or there wasn't. Hargrove couldn't pick one without incriminating himself. Chief Deputy Marshal Terrence Blake arrived right after that. The difference was immediate. Blake didn't posture. He asked direct questions, the ones that turn a messy scene into an accountable report. He asked Hargrove what the suspected crime was. He asked what facts supported the stop. He asked why courthouse security wasn't contacted first. Hargrove tried to answer in generalities. Blake didn't accept generalities. Blake told him to give specifics or stop talking, and he reminded him that the stop had witnesses and video from multiple angles. That's when Hargrove's confidence finally collapsed. He shifted to misunderstanding. He tried to blame the call. He tried to blame vague information. He tried to paint it as caution. Blake didn't let him hide behind that. If you're going to stop someone at a federal courthouse, you need facts, you need channels, you need documentation that holds up. Judge Reed didn't celebrate and he didn't lecture. He kept it clean. He told Asha and Blake that he wanted an incident report generated immediately with a preservation order for all video and audio. He also asked that Hargrove's assignment history at that location be reviewed for similar stops. That last part landed, because everyone there understood what it meant. This wasn't about one bad morning, this was about pattern. Hargrove stood there, boxed in by process. Witnesses, cameras, oversight. No wiggle room left. Judge Reed ended the public part with one line, steady and clear. Next time, verify first, facts before force. And then he did the most cutting thing of all. He walked into the building like he belonged there, because he did. Judge Reed didn't turn it into a debate. He turned it into a record. Same day, he requested preservation of everything tied to the stop: bodycam, radio traffic, dispatch notes, courthouse exterior video, lobby video, and entry logs. No gaps, no lost footage later. Asha and Nguyen gathered witness names and timestamps, not opinions, what they saw, what they heard, what orders were given, where Reed stood, where Hargrove tried to move him. By end of day, Reed filed a formal complaint through the correct channels. Clean and direct, time and location officer identity, reason given, suspicious activity, fits the description. Refusal to name a suspected crime, movement orders without legal basis. Verification result, request for review and corrective action. He demanded a case number and written confirmation of receipt. The video spread anyway, first through staff, then outside the building. Once it started circulating, the handle it quietly option died. Oversight pulled Hargrove's history around the courthouse. Prior stops, prior complaints, prior suspicious person contacts. Same pattern showed up. Vague justification, heavy commands early, then retreat when challenged. Hargrove lost his courthouse detail assignment and went under formal review. Training and discipline followed. Supervisors got questioned too. The courthouse updated procedure after that. Verification became mandatory before escalation at that entrance. If someone claimed affiliation and could be confirmed, Officers had to confirm first instead of trying to control first. And the culture shifted. Staff recorded faster. People asked clearer questions out loud, not to cause scenes, to stop bad stops from becoming routine. That's the lesson. Vague suspicion isn't a legal standard. Process is. If you were in Reed's position, would you stay calm and force verification, or would you just comply to get it over with? Comment what you do. Share this with someone who needs it, and subscribe for more stories like this.
Hey, hold up. What are you doing here?
I live here. What's the reason you stopped me?
Let me see your ID.
That's my house. What do you want?
We've had break-ins, and you seem too suspicious for me.
Standing in my own driveway isn't suspicious.
Let's clear it up. Show what's inside your bag.
No, I don't allow.
What happens when a patrol officer decides a black homeowner doesn't belong on her own street, then blocks her driveway, demands ID, and reaches for her wrist without a real crime? The answer hits different when you realize the cameras didn't just catch a rude stop. They caught an unlawful detention being built in real time. Quick thing, where are you watching from? Drop your city or state in the comments. And if you stay for stories where power gets checked by facts and accountability, hit like and subscribe. These situations don't end the way they should unless somebody keeps a clean record. Now, rewind. It was near dusk in a quiet neighborhood. Porch lights started coming on. People watered plants. Kids' bikes leaned against garages. Normal. Nia Carter pulled into her driveway, got out, and started walking back from her car with her bag. That was it. No rushing, no hiding, no weird behavior. Just a resident doing resident stuff. A patrol car rolled through slow. The officer saw her, then slowed even more. He decided she didn't fit. That's the part nobody admits out loud, but it drove everything that came next. He swung his unit in and parked at an angle that cut off her path. Not a friendly pull-up, a move that said, control. He stepped out and started pressing her immediately. He demanded to know what she was doing. He demanded to know where she lived. He demanded ID. Nia didn't match his energy. She stayed steady. She told him she lived there. She pointed to the house. She asked what crime he was investigating. He didn't answer with a crime. He answered with vibes. He leaned on the usual vague pile. He referenced recent break-ins. Said she looked suspicious. Said he was just checking. He tried to make it sound routine, like the problem was her for noticing. Then he pushed the interaction into a trap. Consent. He angled toward her bag and tried to get her to clear it up by letting him look inside. He framed it like a favor, like it would make everything easier. Nia declined, not loudly, not dramatically, just a clear no. The officer didn't accept no as an answer. He treated it like an offense. He stepped closer. He started giving commands that didn't match the situation. He ordered her to stand in a specific spot. He told her to keep her hands visible. He positioned himself so she wasn't moving toward her own front door. That's a real tactic. You isolate the person. You control the space. You create the look of authority and the feel of danger. Then you write the report later like it was necessary. Nia didn't play into it. She repeated the basics. She lived there. She hadn't broken any law. She wanted to know what specific crime he suspected. He couldn't lock one in. So his story started shifting. First it was break-ins. Then it was a general check. Then it was her behavior. He kept changing the reason because he never had one that held up. And when his words stopped working, he moved to the next tool. Pressure. He implied she was refusing to cooperate. He made it sound like her calm boundary was the problem. He tried to turn voluntary compliance into a test of innocence. That's how these situations flip. You say no to a search and suddenly you're difficult. Nia stayed controlled anyway. She didn't hand him consent. She didn't hand him a narrative. She gave him only what she had to give. The officer didn't like that. He escalated again. He told her he was going to detain her until he sorted it out. No clear crime, no clear facts, just a decision. His decision. He reached for her wrist like the next step was physical restraint. And that's the second everything changed. Because right then the front door opened. Her husband stepped onto the porch, took in the spacing, the angle of the cruiser, the way the officer tried to move Nia away from her own door, and the hand reaching in. He didn't react like a random neighbor. He reacted like a federal attorney who'd seen how this gets rewritten when nobody checks the first draft. He started walking down the steps, calm pace, direct focus, and he was about to force the officer to pick one thing and stick to it, facts or nothing. Daniel Carter didn't step outside to argue feelings. He stepped outside to control the record. He moved down the walkway and stopped at a safe distance, where the body cam would catch him clearly. He kept his hands visible too, not because he had to, because he knew how officers write aggressive into a report when they need cover. He looked at the officer's hand near Nia's wrist and made it simple. He asked what specific crime the officer suspected right now. Not a general problem in the area, not a rumor, a specific crime tied to her. The officer tried to answer with the same fog. He referenced break-ins again. He described her as out of place. He implied he was preventing something. Daniel didn't let him float. He asked what specific facts made Nia look like a suspect instead of a homeowner walking from her own car. He asked what the officer observed before blocking her driveway. He asked what dispatch call sent him there. The officer didn't have a dispatch call. That was the issue. So his explanation shifted again. He pivoted to officer safety. He pivoted to refusal. He tried to make her declining a search sound like she'd done something wrong. Daniel cut that off too. He stated clearly that refusal of a voluntary search didn't create suspicion. He stated that Nia did not consent to any search of her bag, her person, or her property. He repeated it so it would land on audio. Then he forced the officer into a yes or no lane. He asked whether Nia was being detained or whether she was free to go into her house. He asked if the officer planned to physically restrain her. He asked if the officer believed he had probable cause for an arrest. The officer hesitated. You could feel it. That moment where he wanted control but didn't want responsibility. He tried to keep it in the gray area. He acted like it was just a conversation while still standing in a way that blocked Nia from her own front door. He kept giving commands. Stand here. Hands visible. Don't move. Daniel didn't raise his voice. He got sharper. He asked for the officer's name and badge number. He asked for a supervisor to respond immediately. He said he wanted it documented that the officer had blocked the driveway and attempted to detain a resident without a clear crime. That's when the neighborhood started waking up. A curtain moved. A porch door opened across the street. Someone stepped out with a phone held low, pretending not to record while recording anyway. Doorbell cameras stared from multiple angles. One across the street, one next door. Nia's own, mounted right above the porch light. The officer noticed the attention and got tighter. He tried to regain dominance by talking louder and faster. He kept circling back to how Nia could make it easy by cooperating. Daniel didn't bite. He asked again, what facts, what crime, what authority? The officer tried to backfill. He claimed he saw her checking cars. He implied she was lurking. He implied she was about to break in. The problem was the scene didn't match that story at all. She was in her driveway. She'd walked from her own car. She'd pointed at her house. Calm the entire time. Daniel called that out without drama. He described what actually happened in plain language, step by step, so the body cam would capture a clean timeline from a credible voice. The officer made a choice in that moment. He either had to let her go, or he had to commit to detaining her and risk getting exposed for it. He went halfway, the worst kind of halfway. He said he was going to hold her there until a supervisor arrived. Like that solved the legal problem. Like waiting made the reason appear. Daniel stayed planted and repeated the same boundary. No consent, no physical contact, and no moving Nia away from her door. And while all of that played out, dispatch finally crackled back. A supervisor was en route. That's when the officer's face changed, just a little. Not fear, calculation. Because now it wasn't just him and a homeowner anymore. Now it was witnesses, cameras, a federal attorney, and a decision he couldn't quietly undo once someone else showed up. The supervisor pulled up fast. Not lights and sirens, just quick, controlled. Like he'd been told this was turning into a problem. He parked behind the angled cruiser and got out already scanning. Naya by her driveway. The officer squared up like he was holding a perimeter. Daniel on the walkway, with that calm posture that reads like, "I'm not leaving and I'm not confused." The supervisor walked in and didn't start with a speech. He started with a short reset. He separated the space. He told the officer to step back with him a few feet, not a friendly move, a management move. Then he asked what the stop was for. The officer tried to deliver a clean story. He couldn't. He went back to break-ins. He said suspicious. He said refused to cooperate. He tried to make it sound like he'd been polite and she'd been difficult. Daniel didn't let the term slide. He corrected the framing without shouting. He said Nia lived there. He said the officer blocked her path and demanded ID without a specific crime. He said the officer pushed for a bag search and treated refusal like guilt. He said the officer attempted physical restraint on private property with no stable reason. And he said it like a person who knew the exact words that matter later. The supervisor looked at Nia and asked her version. She kept it short. She confirmed she'd identified herself, pointed to her home, declined a voluntary search, and got escalated on anyway. No extra. No anger performance. Just facts. The supervisor did the math in real time. He had a weak stop, witnesses, and multiple cameras. He also had a federal attorney, calmly pinning everything down in front of everyone. So the supervisor took the quickest exit. He told Nia she was not detained. He told her she was free to go inside. He told the officer to return to his vehicle. Then came the apology, the kind departments use when they need the moment to end without admitting anything useful in court. Short, controlled, not emotional. Nia didn't accept it like a favor, and she accepted it like a closure to a situation that never should have happened. She walked toward her front door without rushing, without giving anyone a reason to claim she fled or acted nervous. Daniel didn't let the supervisor leave without locking down one more thing. He asked for the supervisor's name. He asked for the incident or call reference number. He asked how to request the Bodycam footage. He asked for confirmation that Nia did not consent to any search and was never shown a specific suspected crime. The supervisor didn't argue, and he answered enough to move it along. The officer stayed near his cruiser, stiff, quiet, face tight, not angry like a cartoon villain, more like a guy realizing he'd taken a routine patrol decision and dragged it into a documented event with a paper trail he couldn't control, because the street had seen it. One neighbor had been recording openly by now. Another had a ring camera aimed straight at the driveway. Another had a camera that caught the cruiser's angle and the officer stepping into her space. And Nia's doorbell cam had the cleanest view of all. The approach, the commands, the hand going for her wrist, and the moment Daniel walked out. When the vehicles finally rolled away, the neighborhood didn't go back to normal. People stood longer than they needed to. They talked in small clusters. They compared what they saw. Someone asked Nia quietly if she was okay. She said she was fine. She didn't feel fine. She just didn't want to fall apart on the sidewalk in front of everyone. That part hit later, inside the house, when the adrenaline dropped and the reality settled in. This wasn't just rude. This was a near miss. And Daniel didn't treat it like bad luck or one weird officer. He treated it like what it was. An incident that would get rewritten unless they moved first. So that night, while the street quieted down, he started building the record. And he did it the way people win these cases. Not with a rant, with timestamps. Daniel didn't wait for the neighborhood to cool down. He moved first. That mattered. That night, he wrote the timeline while it was still fresh, minute by minute. When the cruiser slowed, when it angled in, when the officer demanded ID, when he pushed for the bag, when he tried to physically restrain Nia, when the supervisor arrived, when the supervisor ended it. He also did something most people don't think to do. He listed the cameras. Nia's doorbell camera, the neighbor across the street with the wide-angle view, the house 2 doors down that caught the patrol car's approach, the phone video from the porch watcher who didn't realize how useful their shaky clip would become. Then he filed the formal complaint. Not a social post. A real complaint routed through the department's process, with a copy sent to the city's risk management and the civilian oversight contact. He requested specific items, not all records. Bodycam footage for the officer and the supervisor. Dispatch audio for that time window. CAD logs showing whether the officer was assigned a call or freelancing. GPS and unit location logs if available. Any prior calls for service on that street? The officer's incident report. Any field interview card? Anything that captured the reason he said he was there. He also sent preservation notices. That's the part that corners a city. Preserve the body cam. Preserve the in-car dash footage. Preserve the radio traffic. Preserve the complaint intake. Preserve any internal messages about the incident. Preserve it all because litigation was reasonably anticipated. That phrase shows up later for a reason. He did the same with the neighborhood cameras. He didn't just ask nicely. He asked neighbors to save the clips and export them immediately before systems overwrote them. Nia didn't have to be reminded why. She'd felt the moment the officer reached for her. She understood what could have been said later if there wasn't video. Days later, the officer's report came in through the normal pipeline. It leaned on the oldest tricks in the book. It framed Nia as suspicious without naming a concrete crime. It leaned on area break-ins without tying them to her behavior. It used refused to cooperate, as if declining a voluntary search was the same as resisting lawful orders. It described his actions like calm procedure. The video didn't match. The doorbell footage showed Nia walking from her own car, normal pace, normal posture. No casing, no hiding, no checking doors. It showed the cruiser angle that boxed her in. It showed the officer stepping into her space after she declined the search. It showed the wrist reach, clear as day. The body cam made it worse for the city, not because it showed screaming, because it showed emptiness. No stable reason. No single consistent story. Just shifting explanations every time Daniel pressed for specifics. Then came the next phase. The claim. Daniel filed the notice with the city, civil rights, unlawful detention, attempted arrest without probable cause, retaliatory escalation after refusing consent. And because Nia was on her own property, the optics got uglier fast. The city's first response tried to minimize it. They leaned on discretion. They leaned on community caretaking. They leaned on reasonable suspicion without explaining what created it. Discovery didn't care about their vibe-based defense. The timeline locked in. The dispatch logs showed no call that required him to be there. The radio traffic showed him scrambling once he realized the supervisor was coming. The body cam captured him trying to justify the stop after the fact. And the neighborhood footage? That footage was neutral. It didn't argue. It just showed what happened. Now the city had a choice. Fight and risk a public trial where their own video played on a loop, or settle and control the damage. They also had another internal problem. Credibility. Once a court saw the report language next to the footage, every other report from that officer became a question mark. Defense attorneys love that. Prosecutors hate it. Departments fear it. An officer who can't be trusted on paper becomes a liability everywhere. That's why the pressure shifted behind the scenes. Meetings happened. Emails flew. The city started talking policy changes while pretending it wasn't connected. The department reviewed the stop like it was a training opportunity, but everyone involved understood the real issue. The stop wasn't weak. It was empty. And Nia wasn't the one who made it a big deal. The officer did when he treated her existence in that neighborhood like a problem that needed force. The city tried to keep it quiet. That was the first move. They offered an early resolution path, the kind that sounds like, we'd like to put this behind everyone. They didn't say they were wrong. They just wanted it gone. Daniel didn't treat it like a negotiation about feelings. He treated it like leverage. He had video. He had logs. He had a report that didn't match reality. He had witnesses. And he had one more thing the city couldn't afford, an officer whose credibility had become a problem on paper. Once that happened, the case stopped being just about Naya. It became about every arrest and every stop that officer had ever justified with the same vague language. That's when the city's tone changed. The settlement talks got serious. Not because they suddenly cared, because they saw the risk. A trial would have forced the department to explain, in public, why a black woman standing in her own driveway got treated like a burglary suspect, with footage playing, with the officers' shifting explanations laid out, with a supervisor ending it because the foundation was weak. So the city paid. Not a symbolic check. A real number. Big enough to hurt the budget line. Big enough to make somebody above the police chief ask why this ever happened. The money wasn't the only part. The policy changes mattered more. The department updated stop guidance around suspicious person calls and self-initiated contacts. They tightened the requirements for detentions on private property. They made supervisors respond faster when an officer escalated a consensual encounter into a detention. They also changed how consent searches had to be documented because she refused couldn't be used as a justification anymore. They didn't label it because of Naya. Departments rarely do. They just changed the rules like it was coincidence. Inside the department, the officer didn't walk away untouched. He got pulled off street duty while the investigation ran. Then came discipline. The exact internal labels didn't matter as much as the outcome. The department couldn't keep putting him in situations where his word mattered. Because after this, his word didn't matter the same way. Defense attorneys would request this footage in every case he touched. Prosecutors would hesitate to call him a clean witness. Supervisors would treat him like a liability. That's how careers end in policing. Not always with a dramatic firing. Sometimes with a slow collapse of trust. In this case, it ended faster. He left the department. Whether they called it resignation, termination, or separation, the reality was the same. He couldn't keep the job once credibility cracked. And that brings us to the point people miss when they watch these stories. Nia didn't win because her husband had a title. She survived the encounter because she stayed calm, asked the right question, and didn't hand over consent just to make an officer feel better. She didn't argue in circles. She didn't give the officer extra material. She kept it tight. And when the officer tried to turn nothing into a detention, the situation got captured clearly enough that the system couldn't pretend it never happened. That's the lesson. Most bad encounters rely on two things: confusion in the moment and rewriting afterward. Nia cut off the confusion. Daniel cut off the rewrite. Now you tell me. If you were in your own driveway and an officer blocked your path and demanded ID without a real crime, what would you do? Would you stay calm? Would you know what to say? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more stories like this, realistic, modern, and focused on accountability, hit like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs the reminder. You don't have to consent to be treated fairly.